I'm going to cut off 2 pieces of this rough cherry to glue up for the top. When I have a piece of rough lumber, I always like to cut off about 1 inch or so off of the end and check for any cracks on the other side that have come through my cutoff. Now if I still see cracks coming through the other side, I need to remove a little bit more of my rough lumber. So before I can cut these boards a rough width, I need to straighten up one edge at the joiner. So these boards overhang my joiner by over 2 inches, so I need to remove as much as I can at the joiner, then I'll finish up that last little strip with a hand plane. So after edge joining both mating boards, I'll be ready to glue these together. I'm going to create a curve right down the center of the top of my Lazy Susan using some contrasting wood, and I'm going to use the same technique that I used in my Mancala board. So this template that I'm using is the same template that I used in my curvy cutting board project. Recycle. So by using some carpet tape, I'll just attach this to my layout line. With a 1/2 inch spiral bit in my plunge router and a guide bushing, I'm going to route a 1/4 inch deep groove all the way down the top of the Lazy Susan. And I've attached a shim to one side of my plunge router to keep the plunge router from tipping. At the bandsaw, I'm going to cut in between this channel that we just created. To remove the rest of the wood that I couldn't get at the bandsaw that was left in between the channel that was cut from the router, I'm going to use a combination of a flush trim bit and a pattern bit. I replaced the 1/2 inch bearing on my 1/2 inch flush trim bit with a 3/4 inch bearing. That way I'll only be removing a small amount of material and I'll be left with 1/8 of an inch of material that I'll remove on the final pass. So I swapped out my flush trim bit with the oversized bearing for a pattern bit which has the bearing on the bottom. With the bearing on the bottom, I'm able to flip the workpiece over, and now I can route downhill or down grain, and this will help to avoid chip out. Because I used a 1/2 inch wide router bit in our plunge router when we formed our initial channel before we split it open at the bandsaw, I need to replace that same amount of material with a 1/2 inch. So I decided I'm going to use 2 1/8 inch strips of walnut sandwiched in between 2 1/8 inch strips of maple. With the top of the Lazy Susan out of the clamps, I need to plane these ribbons down to the surface. I plan on using my circle cutting jig to cut out the circle for the top, but before I can do that, I'm going to mark out for the circle, which is 16 inches in diameter. I need to start my circle with my bandsaw blade at the outermost edge of my circle, so I need to trim off just a little bit on the outside edge of this before I can start my circle cutting at the bandsaw. If you'd like to make your own circle cutting jig for the bandsaw, visit my website where you'll find very detailed plans. So by gradually moving the router fence back little by little, I'll take small passes and I'll eventually get to the depth that I need with my chamfer. For the base of the Lazy Susan, I'm going to use this piece of cherry that's already been face jointed and planed to thickness. All I need to do now is cut it in half and then we'll glue the two halves together. I almost forgot that before we glue these two halves together, we need to edge joint each mating surface so that we have a nice joint. With the bottom of the Lazy Susan out of the clamps, we'll go ahead and use the circle jig again and turn this into a circle. I marked for the holes for the spinny doodad that goes onto the bottom of the Lazy Susan. Now I need to go ahead and pre-drill these holes for some screws. For the finish, I'm going with a mixture of tung oil, mineral spirits, and varnish in equal parts. I like to put it on really thick, and then after a few minutes, just wipe off the excess. So if you like this week's project, please share it with your friends and click the thumbs up button. If you're not already subscribed, go ahead and click the subscribe button too. Thanks for watching, guys.